Meditations of evolution increasingly vaster, of the moon invisible in incipient lunation, approaching perigee, of the infinite lentiginous scintillating uncondensed Milky Way, discernible by daylight by an observer placed at the lower end of a cylindrical vertical shaft 5,000 feet deep, sunk from the surface towards the center of the earth, of Sirius, Alpha and Canis Major, 10 light years, 57 trillion miles distant, and in volume 900 times the dimension of our planet. Of Arcturus, of the precession of equinoxes, of Orion with belt and sextuple sun tether, and nebula in which 100 of our solar systems could be contained, of moribund and of nascent new stars, such as Nova in 1901. Of our system plunging towards the constellation of Hercules, of the parallax, of parallactic drift, of so-called fixed stars, in reality ever-moving wanderers from immeasurably remote eons to infinitely remote futures, in comparison with which the years 70 of allotted human life formed a parenthesis of infinitesimal brevity. Once again, X was amazed that people were still reading this complicated and confusing monster of a novel. He kept reading until it got dark and the surrounding buildings started to glow in green neon lights. The mob was completely intoxicated by now, and when he set out on his journey to Dee's house, he could no longer avoid showers of green liquid pouring down from raised glasses and plastic cups. The crowd was screaming in 1,000 tongues, and X could not really make out what they were chanting. But when he finally left the pub and party district behind and walked out onto a bridge, he found two men with shamrock-shaped glasses instructing others to shout at the top of their lungs. "If we say freedom," one of them bellowed. "You answer freedom," the other continued, and then pointed at himself and let out a howling, "Freedom!" Then he pointed at a group of people that was just following a green light in order to cross the street, which X was a part of as well. Some of the people hesitantly replied with demands for freedom, freedom, freedom. But when the man with the plastic glasses noticed that X wasn't one of them, they seemed to get mad. "What? Don't you want the Irish to be free? Freedom!" They yelled at X, who was still standing in the middle of the road and noticed that the lights had switched to a dark orange. He reached the curb moments before the first people driving through the night, possibly under the influence, rushed past him, no longer able to restrain themselves. X stumbled past the man that had begun to scream for freedom again and kept heading down the concrete grey banks of the Liffey. He passed the bright window of a store that was selling green clothing. On one of the shirts, behind the glass, X read, "No, I will not keep calm, and fuck you." This had probably been a common Irish reaction to the British World War II slogan the t-shirt was referring to, which seemed to experience a sudden revival these days, not just on the British Isles. X went through his pockets and dug out a publication by National Geographic on the city, in which he read, "In 1916, many Irishmen fought in the First World War under Britain, fueled by the promise of an independent Irish government as soon as this emergency had been dealt with. In the meantime, revolutionaries back home organized the Easter Rising of 1916 under the motto, "England's problem is Ireland's chance." During the Second World War, the Irish Free State remained neutral, refraining from joining either the Allies or Axis powers. When X noticed the shimmering green courthouse on the other shore of the Liffey, he remembered that he would have to turn north, and so he crossed a bridge and hasted down a street that led him to a square with giant lamps made of huge planes onto which green lights were projected. The top of the chimney of a nearby whiskey distillery was bright green as well, but when X left the mostly vacant cobblestone square behind, the green lights disappeared from the cityscape. He passed a sign proclaiming CCTV 24/7, and somewhere the shrill sound of an alarm could be heard, echoing through the empty streets. Of the few people he met, even fewer were still dressed in green. Most of them hurried through the cold, heading for the city center. Only one older woman in lime green stood still, swaying slightly from side to side, leaning against the window of a Chinese fast food restaurant. When he passed her, she threw up onto the pavement right in front of him, before going on as if nothing had happened. He reached a big metal gate and got out his touchscreen in order to call D and tell him he had arrived. X stuck his nose through the cold bars and waited until D appeared in the dark before him. When he did, D pressed the small remote in his hand, and the gate slowly set in motion. Then he gave him a quick embrace and led him past a number of identical houses until finally opening the door to one of them. They entered the kitchen, and D pointed at one of the chairs beside a crowded table. When X sat down, D picked up a guitar and began to sing along with a few others. In Dublin's fair city, where the girls are so pretty, I first set my eyes on sweet Molly Malone, as she wheeled her wheelbarrow through the streets broad and narrow, crying cockles and mussels, alive, alive, oh, alive, alive, oh, alive, alive, oh, crying cockles and mussels, alive, alive, oh. Then the lyrics switched to Spanish, and X could no longer understand them. The girl, on the drums to his right, handed him a long, thin cigarette, from which he inhaled heavily before passing it on to yet another drum player. Then he got out his little leather book and scribbled away. Is this the freedom they were yearning for today? An international city brought about by open borders, where you're no longer forced to follow orders and show documents that justify your existence, where you can roam freely without meeting resistance. X looked up from the page and noticed another man with a guitar singing a song that had come to prominence when the members of a Cuban social club had sung it. Suddenly he gestured over at X and yelled out his name, pointing at the book in his lap, and when the girl to his right said, "Read something," X recited the poem he had written on the first page of the leather binder. No time for prose. This place will close quite soon, and outside the moon will be rising. I'll have to head back home to rest every aching bone of my body and every twisted new idea that creeps into my aching head, which I have fed with sweet poison again. Suddenly, X felt someone tapping on his shoulder, and when he turned around, E handed him some sort of cake. "Have some," he said, and then raised a full red glass. He looked at it for a moment and reminisced. As a kid, they used to dip these into wine and give it to us as a treat. When we were out late somewhere, a little tired, that would keep you awake for a couple of hours. Then he handed the glass to X with the words, "Try it." X took the spoon with a little brown ball he had dipped into the wine and swallowed the bittersweet pastry. The Spanish guitar player pointed at him again, singing at the top of his voice, urging him with hasty gestures to join in with a poem. But when X tried to press a few words out of his throat, they were swallowed up by the music. Since some people were still smoking at the other end of the table, both the window and the back door were open. But X decided not to mind the fact that he was beginning to shiver in the cold gust that blew in when D handed him the spliff that was being passed around again. "Fuck it, I'm already sick," X thought, and took the crumbly cigarette. When he inhaled, D said, "Did you know that stuff was legal for a day here in Ireland? A couple of weeks ago. Along pretty much any other drug there is. Due to some legal technicality, a law had become invalid or something, and they had to spend all night drafting specific bills outlawing all of these substances, again, one by one." D was interrupted by loud coughing from A, who had sunken deep into the comfortable armchair beside them that stood right in front of the open door. "It's freezing and I'm too pissed to get up." X left his seat in order to throw the joint butt into the garden. As he closed the door to the terrace, A continued, "Oh man, I haven't been sober for a week now. Saturday I've been out, Sunday I've been out, Monday I was really hungover at work, and then in the evening I went out drinking." "It's the season, I guess," X replied when he sat back down. "Yes, it really is.